pregnant mother bear was about to be put down until this human baby told the shocking truth. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines, casting dappled shadows across the small cabin where Lily Morgan lived with her husband Jacob and their 10-month-old daughter Emma. The peaceful forest surrounding their home had always been a sanctuary, a place where wildlife and humans coexisted in quiet harmony. Until today. Lily stood at the kitchen window, her hands trembling as she washed breakfast dishes. Outside, a commotion was brewing. Men with rifles and serious expressions gathered at the edge of their property, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Among them was Sheriff Connor Adams, a normally kind-faced man who now looked grim and determined. "Jacob," Lily called, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're here about the bear." Jacob joined her at the window, little Emma balanced on his hip. The baby cooed softly, her bright eyes taking in the scene outside with unusual intensity. "Looks like the whole town showed up," Jacob muttered, adjusting Emma in his arms. "I told them she wasn't dangerous." For weeks, a large female bear had been spotted near their cabin. Unlike most bears that kept their distance, this one seemed drawn to the area, often appearing at the forest edge near their garden. The townspeople had grown increasingly worried, especially after Old Man Bennett's chickens went missing last week. The bear, heavily pregnant and searching for food, had become the prime suspect in what the town considered a growing threat. "They're going to kill her," Lily said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Connor told me yesterday they voted to put her down. Said a pregnant bear is twice as dangerous because she's protecting future cubs." Jacob set Emma down in her playpen and sighed deeply. "I'll go talk to them. Maybe I can convince them to relocate her instead." As Jacob stepped outside to join the gathering crowd, Lily knelt beside Emma's playpen. The baby was unusually quiet, her small face serious as she stared out the window. Something in her daughter's expression made Lily's heart beat faster. "What is it, sweetie?" Lily whispered, following Emma's gaze. There, at the edge of the trees, the pregnant bear had appeared. Her dark fur gleamed in the morning sunlight, her swollen belly evidence of the new life she carried. She moved slowly, cautiously, as if aware of the danger that awaited her. The men hadn't spotted her yet, but it was only a matter of time. Emma suddenly began to whimper, her tiny hands reaching toward the window. The sound grew louder, more insistent, unlike her usual cries. It was as if she was trying to tell her mother something important, something urgent about the bear that nobody else understood. Lily looked from her daughter to the bear and back again, a cold realization washing over her. The timing of the bear's appearances, the way Emma always seemed to sense when the animal was nearby, the strange connection that seemed to exist between them. It couldn't be coincidence. There was something more happening here, something Lily couldn't yet comprehend. Outside, Sheriff Adams raised his hand, signaling to the others. They began to move toward the trees, weapons ready. Time was running out for the mother bear. Lily's heart pounded against her chest as she watched the men advance toward the unsuspecting animal. Emma's cries grew more frantic, her little face reddening with effort. Something about the sound made Lily pause. It wasn't just a cry. It was almost like her daughter was trying to form words, impossible as that seemed for a 10-month-old. "Jacob!" Lily shouted through the open window. "Wait!" Her husband turned, confusion etched across his weathered face. The other men hesitated, their rifles still raised. The bear, suddenly aware of their presence, froze in place, her dark eyes wide with what looked unmistakably like fear. "I need to bring Emma outside," Lily called, already lifting her daughter from the playpen. The baby immediately stopped crying, her tiny hands grasping at Lily's shirt. "Are you crazy?" Sheriff Adams called back. "Keep that child inside." "This bear is dangerous." But Lily was already moving toward the door, a strange certainty guiding her actions. Jacob rushed to meet her on the porch, his face pale with concern. "Lily, what are you doing?" he whispered urgently. "This isn't safe for Emma." "Look at her, Jacob," Lily said, nodding toward their daughter. "She knows something. I can't explain it, but I think she's trying to tell us something about the bear." Emma's eyes remained fixed on the animal at the forest's edge. The bear had not run, despite the clear threat. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her gaze locked on the tiny human in Lily's arms. The townspeople murmured anxiously as Lily stepped carefully off the porch, keeping a safe distance from both the men and the bear. Emma had gone completely quiet now, an unnatural stillness taking over her small body. "Mrs. Morgan, please go back inside," Sheriff Adams said firmly. "We need to handle this situation before anyone gets hurt." "Just give me 1 minute," Lily pleaded. "Something isn't right here." Old Man Bennett pushed forward, his weathered face twisted with anger. "That beast killed my chickens. She's a danger to our livestock and our families. We can't risk waiting until she attacks a person." "We don't know it was her," Jacob argued, moving protectively closer to Lily and Emma. "And even if it was, she's just trying to feed herself and her cubs." The argument might have continued, but at that moment Emma did something extraordinary. She raised one tiny hand and pointed directly at the bear, then patted her own stomach with her other hand. The gesture was so deliberate, so unbabylike, that everyone fell silent. "What in the world?" Sheriff Adams muttered. Emma repeated the motion. "Point at the bear, pat her stomach. Point, Pat. Point, Pat." Her face was serious, concentrated in a way that seemed impossible for a child her age. "She's trying to tell us something about the bear's pregnancy," Lily said softly. "I know it sounds crazy, but look at her." The bear shifted slightly, her massive paws making no sound on the forest floor. In the silence that followed, a distant memory surfaced in Lily's mind, something her grandmother had told her long ago about children born with special gifts, about the connection between certain souls and the natural world. "Sheriff," Jacob said slowly, "I think we should consider that there might be more to this situation than we understand." Connor Adams lowered his rifle slightly, his brow furrowed. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Before Jacob could answer, Dr. Savannah Reed, the town's veterinarian, stepped forward from the back of the group. She had been observing silently, her expert eyes taking in the bear's condition. "Connor," she said quietly, "look at how that bear is standing, the way she's holding herself. I've never seen a wild bear behave like this around humans." Indeed, the pregnant bear remained unnaturally still, her posture almost submissive. There was an intelligence in her eyes that seemed to transcend animal instinct. "And look at how she's breathing," Dr. Reed continued, pointing. "It's labored, irregular." As if on cue, the bear let out a low, pained groan and shifted her weight uncomfortably. Emma immediately responded with a similar sound, a perfect mimicry that sent chills down Lily's spine. Then came the twist that no one could have anticipated. The bear slowly, cautiously, lowered herself to the ground, rolling partially onto her side. Her swollen belly was now fully visible to everyone, and even from a distance they could see something was wrong. Very wrong. Dr. Reed gasped, her professional composure momentarily shattered. "She's not just pregnant," she whispered. "She's in active labor. And from the look of it, she's in trouble." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emma continued to stare at the bear, her little face now streaked with tears. She made the gesture again, point at the bear, pat her stomach, but this time followed it with a new motion. She reached her hand out, opening and closing her tiny fist, as if grasping for something. "I think she's asking for help," Lily said, her voice barely audible. "She's saying, 'The bear needs our help.'" Sheriff Adams looked from the child to the suffering animal and back again. His weathered face softened slightly. "Savannah," he said, turning to the veterinarian, "is there anything you can do for her?" Dr. Reed hesitated, calculating risks and possibilities. "I'm not specialized in wildlife, but yes, I have some equipment in my truck, but we'd need to sedate her first, and that's risky during labor." Old Man Bennett spat on the ground. "This is ridiculous. It's just a wild animal and a dangerous one at that." "No," came a new voice, quiet but firm. Everyone turned to see Michael Hayes, the town's oldest resident and most respected elder. He had been watching silently from the sidelines, his ancient eyes taking in every detail. "That child sees something we don't. I've heard stories my whole life about children born with the sight. My own grandmother had it." "The sight?" Sheriff Adams repeated skeptically. Michael nodded slowly. "The ability to understand animals, to sense things beyond what we can see or hear. It's rare, but it happens." He gestured toward Emma, who was still making her desperate gestures. "That baby knows the bear needs help, and somehow the bear knows the baby understands." A heavy silence fell over the group. The bear groaned again, a sound of unmistakable distress. Emma whimpered in response, her tiny face a mask of concern. "I can try to help her, Doctor," Reed said finally, "but I'll need everyone's cooperation, and we'll need to move quickly." Sheriff Adams took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. The decision weighed heavily on him, the safety of the townspeople against the mysterious connection between this child and a wild animal in distress. "All right," he said at last. "We'll try it your way. But at the first sign of danger, we do what needs to be done." "Understood?" Lily nodded gratefully, clutching Emma closer. The baby had gone quiet again, her eyes never leaving the suffering bear. Something profound was happening in this moment, something that defied logical explanation. As Dr. Reed hurried to her truck to gather supplies, Jacob stepped closer to his wife and daughter. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "How could Emma know?" Lily shook her head slightly. "I don't know, but I think my grandmother's stories about children with special gifts might be true. Emma has been different from the start. The way she watches things, how she seems to understand more than she should." The townspeople began to organize themselves under Dr. Reed's direction, setting up a perimeter and gathering the supplies she would need. The pregnant bear remained where she had fallen, her eyes now half closed in pain, her breathing becoming more labored by the minute. And through it all, baby Emma watched, her tiny features set in a determined expression far too mature for her age. Whatever connection existed between her and this wild creature, it was about to be tested in the most dramatic way possible. The life of the mother bear and her unborn cubs now hung in the balance. Dr. Reed worked swiftly, unpacking equipment from her truck with practiced hands. She pulled out a tranquilizer gun, carefully measuring a dose that would sedate the bear without harming her cubs or complicating her labor further. "I'll need to get closer," she explained, her voice steady despite the tension. "Jacob, Connor, I need you two to create a safe approach path. Everyone else, stay back, but be ready if I call for help." Lily stood rooted to the spot, Emma still cradled in her arms. The baby had gone eerily quiet, her eyes tracking every movement of the veterinarian with unnatural focus. "What if the sedative hurts the cubs?" Lily asked, voicing the concern that had been growing in her mind. Dr. Reed paused, her expression grave. "It's a risk, but if we don't help her, neither she nor the cubs will survive. She's clearly in distress." As if to confirm this assessment, the bear let out another low, rumbling groan that sent shivers through the gathered crowd. Her massive paws scrabbled weakly at the earth, leaving deep furrows in the soft soil. "Something else is wrong," Michael Hayes said suddenly. The old man had moved closer, his weathered face creased with concern. "Look at her left hind leg." Everyone turned to look. Now that the bear had shifted position, they could see a cruel metal trap clamped around her back leg, the rusty teeth digging deep into her flesh. Blood matted the fur around the wound, evidence that she had been struggling with the injury for some time. "A trap," Sheriff Adams exclaimed, his face darkening with anger. "Who would set a trap this close to town?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Trapping was strictly regulated in the area, and setting traps so close to residential properties was illegal, not to mention dangerous. Across the clearing, Old Man Bennett's face had gone ashen. He took an involuntary step backward, his eyes darting nervously from the bear to the sheriff and back again. Jacob noticed the movement and narrowed his eyes. "Bennett? Do you know something about this?" The old man's guilty expression told the story before he could deny it. "I was just protecting my chickens," he stammered. "Didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, just wanted to scare off whatever was taking them." "You fool," Dr. Reed snapped, her professional composure cracking. "That trap is why she couldn't hunt properly, why she's been scavenging closer to homes. She's been injured and desperate, trying to feed herself and her unborn cubs." Sheriff Adams turned to Bennett, his expression thunderous. "We'll deal with you later. Right now, we need to save this animal. An animal that's only in this situation because of human stupidity." The revelation changed the atmosphere instantly. What had been fear of a dangerous predator transformed into collective shame and concern. Even those who had been most eager to put down the bear now looked on with sympathy. Dr. Reed turned back to her equipment, adjusting the sedative dose. "The injury complicates things. She's likely weakened from blood loss and infection, on top of the stress of labor." A soft whimper from Emma drew everyone's attention. The baby had begun making a new gesture, her tiny hand moving from her mouth to her stomach, over and over. "I think she's trying to tell us something else," Lily said quietly. "She keeps making this motion." She demonstrated what Emma was doing. Michael Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Hunger. The bear is hungry. Probably hasn't eaten properly in days because of that trap." Dr. Reed considered this new information. "That makes this even more dangerous. If she's weak from hunger, the sedative might hit her too hard." She glanced at Sheriff Adams. "We need to stabilize her somehow before I can treat her properly." As they debated what to do next, Emma suddenly began squirming in Lily's arms, reaching out toward their cabin with insistent little hands. "What is it, sweetie?" Lily asked, trying to decipher her daughter's communication. Emma's gestures became more emphatic, pointing to the cabin, then to her mouth, then to the bear. Jacob's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The honey. She wants us to give the bear honey." "We have a few jars of local honey in the pantry," Lily explained to the confused onlookers. "Emma loves it. We give her a tiny bit as a treat sometimes." "That's actually not a bad idea," Dr. Reed said slowly. "Sugar would give her a quick energy boost. It might help stabilize her enough for me to work safely." Without waiting for further discussion, Jacob sprinted back to the cabin. He returned moments later with 2 large jars of golden honey. "How do we get her to eat it?" Sheriff Adams asked, eyeing the suffering bear warily. Dr. Reed thought for a moment. "We need to get it close enough for her to smell it. Bears have an incredibly powerful sense of smell. If she's hungry enough, instinct might overcome her fear." Jacob unscrewed one of the jars and, with extreme caution, began to approach the bear. The animal's nostrils flared as the sweet scent reached her, her eyes opening wider. "Easy," Jacob murmured, his voice gentle despite his racing heart. "This will help you, girl. Just stay calm." The bear watched him approach, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and desperate hope. When Jacob was still a safe distance away, he carefully set the open jar on the ground and backed away slowly. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with tremendous effort, the bear dragged herself a few inches closer to the honey. She extended her tongue, lapping weakly at the sweet offering. "It's working, Doctor," Reed whispered. "Give her the second jar, too." Jacob complied, placing the second jar within the bear's reach. The animal consumed the honey with increasing enthusiasm, strength visibly returning to her massive frame. While this was happening, Dr. Reed prepared her equipment. "I'll sedate her now, while she's distracted with the food. Once she's unconscious, we can remove that trap and check on the cubs." But as she raised the tranquilizer gun, Emma suddenly began crying. Not her usual cry, but a sharp, urgent sound that startled everyone. She waved her arms frantically, clearly distressed. "Wait," Lily said, trying to calm her daughter. "I think she's saying we shouldn't sedate the bear yet." "We have to," Dr. Reed insisted. "I can't safely treat her while she's conscious." Emma's cries grew more intense. She made a pushing motion with her tiny hands, then pointed to the bear's swollen belly. Dr. Reed froze, her experienced eyes reassessing the bear's condition. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I think the first cub is coming now. If I sedate her in the middle of active birth—" "It could kill both her and the cubs," Jacob finished, understanding the gravity of the situation. They all watched in stunned silence as the bear's body tensed with a powerful contraction. She let out a low, guttural sound, the unmistakable vocalization of a mother in the throes of birth. "What do we do now?" Sheriff Adams asked, his earlier authority giving way to genuine concern. Dr. Reed set down the tranquilizer gun and quickly rifled through her supplies. "We let nature take its course, but stay ready to intervene if necessary. I've assisted with wildlife births before, but never a bear, and certainly never one with a traumatic injury." The entire town seemed to hold its breath as the bear labored. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Emma remained unusually focused, her eyes never leaving the suffering animal. Occasionally, she would make soft cooing sounds that seemed to calm the bear, as if the two were communicating on some primal level that the adults couldn't access. Then came the moment of truth. With a final, powerful contraction, the bear delivered her first cub, a tiny, wet bundle of dark fur that lay motionless on the forest floor. "The cub isn't moving," someone whispered anxiously. Emma made a desperate sound, her little face contorting with distress. She squirmed so forcefully in Lily's arms that her mother could barely hold her. "She wants to go to them," Lily realized with sudden clarity. "She wants to help the cub." "Absolutely not," Sheriff Adams said firmly. "It's too dangerous. The mother could attack at any moment, especially with a newborn." But the bear did something extraordinary. Instead of gathering her cub close, as would be natural, she nudged the motionless baby with her nose, then looked directly at the humans, her eyes holding an unmistakable plea. "She's asking for our help," Michael Hayes said softly. "She knows something is wrong with her cub." Dr. Reed hesitated only briefly before making her decision. "I need to check that cub. If it's not breathing, there might be a short window to revive it." "No," Sheriff Adams began, but the veterinarian was already moving, approaching the bear and her newborn with slow, deliberate steps. The mother bear watched Dr. Reed advance, her eyes alert but showing no signs of aggression. If anything, she seemed to be waiting, hoping. When Dr. Reed reached the tiny cub, she quickly assessed its condition. "It's alive, but barely. The airway might be blocked." With gentle, practiced movements, she cleared the cub's mouth and nose, then massaged its tiny chest. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the little body shuddered, and a weak, squeaking sound emerged from the newborn bear. A collective sigh of relief passed through the onlookers. The mother bear made a soft rumbling sound, her eyes never leaving her cub. "That's amazing," Jacob whispered. "She's letting Savannah help her baby." "It's like she knows we're trying to help," Lily agreed, her voice filled with wonder. But their relief was short-lived. The bear suddenly tensed again, another powerful contraction racking her massive frame. Dr. Reed looked up, her face grave. "There's more cubs coming, but something's wrong. She's too weak from the injury and blood loss." She turned to Sheriff Adams. "I need to sedate her now and perform an emergency procedure, or we'll lose the rest of the litter and probably the mother, too." The sheriff nodded grimly. "Do what you have to do." As Dr. Reed prepared the tranquilizer, Emma began making frantic gestures again, pointing to the trap still cruelly clamped around the bear's leg. "The trap," Lily translated. "She's saying we need to remove the trap first." Dr. Reed assessed the situation quickly. "She's right. That thing is causing her immense pain and stress, which is complicating the birth. But removing it will be dangerous without sedation." "I can help," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Ethan Marshall, the town's blacksmith, stepping forward. "I have tools that can cut through that metal. If someone can distract her, I might be able to release the trap without sedating her." It was a risky plan, but they were running out of options. As Ethan hurried to his truck for tools, Dr. Reed cradled the first cub, keeping it warm while monitoring its breathing. "The honey," Jacob suggested. "We can use the rest of the honey to distract her while Ethan works on the trap." Working together with a coordination born of desperation, the townspeople implemented their plan. Jacob placed more honey near the bear's head, while Ethan approached cautiously from behind, heavy bolt cutters in hand. Sheriff Adams and 2 other men stood ready with rifles, a last resort that no one wanted to use. Emma watched the proceedings with an intensity that continued to astound everyone present. She had stopped crying and now sat perfectly still in her mother's arms, as if trying to communicate calm to the laboring bear. Ethan reached the trap and, with extreme care, positioned his cutters around the metal spring. The bear was focused on the honey, but everyone knew her awareness could shift in an instant. "On 3, Ethan whispered. 1, 2, 3. With a powerful squeeze, he cut through the trap's mechanism. The cruel device sprang open, releasing its grip on the bear's injured leg. The bear roared, not in aggression, but in relief, as blood flowed freely from the wound. Dr. Reed moved in immediately, applying pressure to stop the bleeding while Ethan retreated to a safe distance. "Now, the sedative," Dr. Reed instructed. "Quick, while she's distracted by the relief of pressure." Sheriff Adams handed her the loaded tranquilizer gun. With practiced efficiency, Dr. Reed administered the sedative. Within minutes, the bear's eyes began to droop, her massive body relaxing as the drug took effect. "We need to work fast, Doctor," Reed said as the bear finally lost consciousness. "The cubs won't survive long if they're not delivered soon." What followed was a scene few in the small town would ever forget. Their veterinarian performing an emergency cesarean section on a wild bear in the middle of the forest, with the entire community rallying to help. People ran back and forth from the cabin with clean towels, hot water, and anything else Dr. Reed requested. Throughout it all, baby Emma remained focused and calm, as if she understood exactly what was happening. Occasionally, she would make soft sounds that seemed to coincide with important moments in the procedure, drawing astonished glances from the adults. After what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Reed carefully extracted 2 more cubs from their mother's womb. Unlike the first, these were silent and alarmingly still. "They're not breathing," she announced, her voice tight with concern. "I need help stimulating them." Without hesitation, Lily stepped forward, Emma still in her arms. The baby immediately reached toward the newborn cubs, her tiny hands opening and closing. "Let her see them," Michael Hayes urged. "The child has guided us this far. Trust her." Dr. Reed hesitated only briefly before nodding. Lily knelt beside the unconscious mother bear, holding Emma close enough to see the tiny cubs but not touch them. Emma made a series of soft sounds, not quite words, yet somehow conveying clear meaning. She puffed her cheeks and blew out air, then repeated the gesture. "Breathe," Lily translated in wonder. "She's telling us they need to breathe." Dr. Reed, acting on instinct and desperation, began to gently breathe small puffs of air into the cubs' tiny nostrils, alternating between them while massaging their chests. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, as if responding to some unheard command, both cubs simultaneously took their first shuddering breaths. Tiny squeaks emerged from their throats as they began to move, their miniature paws flexing in the air. A cheer went up from the gathered townspeople. Dr. Reed sat back on her heels, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It worked," she whispered. "All 3 cubs are alive." The celebration was tempered by the knowledge that the mother bear still lay unconscious, her future uncertain. Dr. Reed turned her attention to cleaning and bandaging the leg wound, administering antibiotics, and monitoring the bear's vital signs. "Will she survive?" Jacob asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Dr. Reed's expression was cautiously optimistic. "The next few hours will be critical, but bears are incredibly resilient. With the trap removed and proper care for the infection, she has a fighting chance." As the afternoon wore on, most of the townspeople returned to their homes, but a core group remained to help Dr. Reed monitor the bear and her cubs. A makeshift shelter was constructed to protect them from the elements, and the cubs were kept warm with heated blankets. Emma refused to leave, throwing a rare tantrum whenever Lily tried to take her back to the cabin. Eventually, they compromised by setting up a safe observation area where Lily could sit with Emma and watch over the bear family. As twilight descended on the forest, casting long shadows between the trees, the mother bear finally began to stir. Dr. Reed tensed, uncertain how the animal would react upon waking. Would she remember their help, or would wild instinct take over, turning her into a dangerous threat? "Everyone stay back," she cautioned, positioning herself between the bear and the observers. "She'll be disoriented and possibly aggressive when she fully wakes." The bear's massive head lifted slightly, her eyes blinking slowly as she fought against the lingering effects of the sedative. A low, rumbling growl emanated from her throat, not quite threatening, but confused and wary. Emma suddenly squirmed in Lily's arms, letting out a series of soft coos and babbles that sounded almost like a language. To everyone's astonishment, the bear's growling ceased. She turned her head toward the sound, nostrils flaring as she caught the baby's scent. She recognizes Emma's voice. Michael Hayes whispered in awe. The connection between them is real. Dr. Reed remained cautious but fascinated. "Keep talking to her, Emma," she encouraged, though she knew the baby couldn't possibly understand her instructions. Yet Emma seemed to know exactly what to do. She continued her strange vocalizations, her tiny hands making gentle gestures in the air. The bear watched, fully alert now, but showing no signs of aggression. Instead, she seemed almost mesmerized by the human child. Then came a heart-stopping moment. The bear tried to move toward her cubs, who were still nestled in a warm blanket near Dr. Reed, but her injured leg couldn't support her weight, and she collapsed with a pained whimper. "She can't reach her babies," Lily said, her voice breaking with empathy. Dr. Reed faced an impossible dilemma. The cubs needed their mother, but moving them closer to her posed significant risk to everyone present. Before she could decide, Emma made the choice for them. With a strength and coordination that shocked her parents, the 10-month-old suddenly wriggled free from Lily's grasp and began crawling toward the bear cubs. "Emma!" Lily screamed, lunging forward only to be held back by Jacob. "Wait," he said, his voice tight with fear but also wonder. "Look at the bear." The massive animal had gone completely still, watching Emma's approach with what could only be described as recognition. There was no aggression in her posture, no sign of the protective fury one would expect from a mother bear seeing a human approach her newborns. Sheriff Adams had his rifle raised, his finger trembling near the trigger. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Don't shoot," Michael Hayes commanded with surprising authority. "This is something sacred, something beyond our understanding." Emma reached the cubs and, to everyone's astonishment, gently patted the first one. The cub that Dr. Reed had revived immediately after birth. The tiny bear made a squeaking sound, its eyes still tightly closed, its wet fur beginning to dry into a soft fuzz. Then Emma did something that defied all explanation. She carefully, deliberately, picked up the cub. "Oh my God," Dr. Reed breathed, frozen in place like everyone else. "No one move. No one say a word." With the bear cub cradled awkwardly in her small arms, Emma turned and began crawling back. Not toward her parents, but toward the mother bear. Time seemed to stand still as the baby girl carried the cub to its mother. The adult bear watched, her dark eyes showing an intelligence that seemed impossible for a wild animal. When Emma reached her, the baby girl carefully placed the cub against its mother's warm fur. The mother bear immediately nuzzled her cub, her massive tongue gently cleaning the tiny creature. Emma sat back on her diapered bottom, watching with what looked like satisfaction, then turned and crawled back toward the remaining cubs. "She's bringing the cubs to their mother," Jacob whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "How does she know to do that?" One by one, Emma transported the remaining cubs to their mother, each time moving with careful determination that belied her young age. No one dared interfere, mesmerized by the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. When the last cub was safely nestled against its mother, Emma sat beside the bear family, her tiny hand resting on the mother's massive paw. The bear made no move to harm her. Instead, she seemed to accept the child's presence as natural, even welcome. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Reed said softly. "In all my years of veterinary medicine, I've never witnessed such behavior from a wild animal." Michael Hayes nodded solemnly. "Because it isn't just animal behavior. There's something else at work here, something our ancestors understood, but we've forgotten." As night fell completely, the small group maintained their vigil. Lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the extraordinary tableau of human, child, and bear family. Dr. Reed checked the mother bear's vital signs periodically, amazed at how the animal allowed her approach as long as Emma remained nearby. "Her fever is breaking," the veterinarian reported after midnight. "The antibiotics are working. If we can keep her stable through the night, I think she'll recover." Around 2 in the morning, a strange sound echoed through the trees, a deep, reverberating call that was neither bear nor any known forest creature. The mother bear's head lifted, her ears pricked forward in recognition. "What was that?" Sheriff Adams asked, suddenly alert, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. Michael Hayes's weathered face creased with concern. "That's a male bear, a big one, from the sound of it." Dr. Reed tensed. "The father?" "Possibly," Michael replied. "But that doesn't make it any less dangerous. Male bears sometimes kill cubs that aren't their own. Even if these are his offspring, he might be aggressive toward us for being near his mate." The call came again, closer this time. The mother bear responded with a soft chuffing sound, seemingly unconcerned by the approaching male. "We need to move back, Doctor," Reed advised. "Give them space. If it is the father, our presence might provoke him." But as they prepared to retreat, Emma once again defied all expectations. Instead of showing fear, she clapped her hands together excitedly and pointed toward the dark forest where the sounds originated. "She knows him," Lily realized with sudden certainty. "Somehow, she knows the male bear, too." Before anyone could react, a massive shape emerged from the trees, an enormous male bear, his shoulder height easily reaching Jacob's chest. He moved with surprising grace for such a large creature, his powerful muscles rippling beneath his dark fur. Sheriff Adams raised his rifle, but Jacob pushed the barrel down. "Wait," he urged. "Look at Emma." The baby was making welcoming gestures, her face alight with what could only be described as joy. The male bear approached cautiously, his focus entirely on the mother bear and cubs. He sniffed the air, catching the scent of humans, but showed no aggression. When he reached the family group, he gently nuzzled the mother bear's head, then bent to inspect each cub in turn. Only after this ritual did he seem to notice Emma. The massive bear turned his attention to the human child, lowering his head to her level. Every adult present held their breath, poised to intervene if necessary. But intervention proved unnecessary. The male bear simply sniffed Emma carefully, then licked her face once with his enormous tongue, causing the baby to giggle in delight. "It's like they know each other," Dr. Reed whispered in amazement, "like there's some history between them." "Or some connection we can't comprehend," Michael Hayes added. The male bear settled his massive bulk beside his mate and cubs, creating a protective barrier between them and the humans. Emma showed no fear, remaining close to the bear family even as Lily tried to coax her away. "Emma, sweetie, please come back to Mommy," Lily called softly, her voice tight with anxiety. But Emma seemed determined to stay put. She patted the male bear's massive paw, then made a series of gestures that had become familiar throughout the day, pointing at the bears, then at the forest, then making a walking motion with her fingers. "I think she's trying to tell us something about where they should go," Jacob interpreted, now somewhat accustomed to his daughter's unusual communication. Michael Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "The bears can't stay here. Even if we convinced everyone in town to accept them, and this isn't a safe place for them to raise their cubs. They need a more remote territory, away from humans." "But the mother can't travel yet," Dr. Reed objected. "Her leg needs time to heal, and the cubs are newborns. They need at least a few weeks before they can be moved safely." A heavy silence fell as they contemplated this dilemma. Emma broke it by making another series of gestures, pointing to the cabin, then making a roof shape with her hands, then pointing to the bears. Lily's eyes widened as understanding dawned. She wants us to give them shelter, to let them stay until they're strong enough to leave. That's crazy, Sheriff Adams protested. We can't keep wild bears as house guests. Not in the house, Jacob clarified. But we have that old barn at the edge of our property. It's sturdy, sheltered, and far enough from the main house to be safe. Dr. Reed considered this suggestion, her professional assessment overriding her initial skepticism. It could work, actually. I could monitor the mother's recovery and the cubs' development. Once they're strong enough, we could transport them to a more appropriate habitat. And how exactly do we convince a family of wild bears to follow us to a barn? Sheriff Adams asked incredulously. As if in answer, Emma patted the male bear's nose, then pointed toward the distant barn, visible as a dark silhouette against the night sky. To everyone's astonishment, the bear lifted his head in that direction, seeming to understand. I think, Michael Hayes said slowly, that Emma has already convinced them. What followed was one of the most extraordinary processions the small town had ever witnessed. The male bear gently helped his mate to her feet, supporting her weight as she limped forward. Dr. Reed and Jacob carried the cubs in a warm blanket, while Lily followed with Emma in her arms. Sheriff Adams and Michael Hayes brought up the rear, still wary but increasingly amazed by the unfolding miracle. By dawn, the bears were settled in the old barn, fresh straw providing a comfortable nest for the mother and cubs. The male bear positioned himself near the entrance, his massive body a natural deterrent to any potential threats. Word spread quickly through the town. By mid-morning, a steady stream of curious visitors had arrived at the Morgan property, eager to glimpse the miraculous bears and the baby who could somehow communicate with them. Dr. Reed established strict viewing rules to minimize stress on the animals, allowing only small groups to approach the barn at designated times. Old Man Bennett was among the visitors. His weathered face creased with shame as he approached Jacob and Lily. I came to apologize, he said gruffly. I never meant for any creature to suffer like that. Just wanted to protect my chickens. He hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. This is to cover the vet bills and anything else they need. It's all I have saved, but it's yours. Jacob looked at the old man's genuine remorse and nodded in acceptance. We all make mistakes, Mr. Bennett. What matters is making them right. As the day progressed, something remarkable began to happen. The townspeople, initially drawn by curiosity, found themselves touched by the plight of the bear family. Donations poured in, food, medical supplies, offers of assistance with transportation when the time came to relocate the bears. By evening, what had begun as a potential tragedy had transformed into a community mission. A town meeting was hastily organized in the Morgan's front yard with Sheriff Adams presiding. I propose we establish a wildlife corridor through our town lands, he announced to murmurs of approval. A protected path where animals can travel safely without encountering traps or hunters. And I further propose that we name it after the child who taught us all a valuable lesson about compassion, Emma's Way. The vote was unanimous. Even Old Man Bennett raised his hand in support, his earlier hostility replaced by newfound respect for the forest creatures he shared his land with. As the impromptu celebration continued outside, Lily sat quietly in the barn with Emma, watching the bear family rest. The mother bear was recovering well, her fever gone, her injured leg already showing signs of healing. The cubs nursed vigorously, their tiny bodies growing stronger by the hour. How did you know? Lily whispered to her daughter, not expecting an answer. How did you understand what they needed when none of us could? Emma looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her years. She patted her chest, then touched Lily's heart, then pointed to the bears. Same, she said clearly, her first actual word, spoken with perfect clarity. Lily gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Same? We're the same as them? Is that what you're saying, sweetheart? Emma nodded solemnly, then returned her attention to the bears, a small smile playing on her lips. Watching her daughter, Lily was struck by a profound realization. Perhaps Emma's gift wasn't about some mystical ability to communicate with animals. Perhaps it was simply that she hadn't yet learned to see barriers where adults perceived them, barriers of species, of language, of understanding. In her innocent perception, a mother in distress was simply that, a mother who needed help, regardless of whether she walked on 2 legs or 4. As evening deepened into night, Dr. Reed joined Lily in the barn, her medical bag in hand for a final check of her patients. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, as she examined the mother bear's wound. "Emma's connection with these bears, it's extraordinary, but maybe not as inexplicable as we first thought." Lily looked up curiously. "What do you mean?" Dr. Reed hesitated, organizing her thoughts. "There's a theory in wildlife biology called interspecies empathy. It suggests that certain individuals, usually children before they're fully socialized into human patterns, can form connections with animals that transcend our normal understanding." "Like Emma and these bears," Lily murmured. "Exactly," Dr. Reed nodded. "But here's where it gets interesting. The theory suggests these connections aren't random. They're often based on parallel experiences or situations." She glanced meaningfully at Lily. "You were pregnant with Emma when you first moved to this cabin, weren't you?" Lily's breath caught as understanding dawned. "Yes, I was 8 months along. We wanted to be settled before she arrived. And you told me once that your labor with Emma was difficult, that there were complications." Lily nodded slowly, memories flooding back. "Yes, I nearly died. If Jacob hadn't gotten me to the hospital in time." She trailed off, then looked at the mother bear with new eyes. "You think, somehow, Emma remembers?" That she recognized a similar struggle in the bear. Dr. Reed smiled gently. "Children perceive more than we give them credit for, especially in their earliest months. Perhaps Emma didn't remember in the way we think of memory, but maybe she recognized something. A pattern, a feeling, a connection between her own birth story and what the bear was experiencing. And that's why she was so determined to help," Lily whispered, looking at her daughter with wonder. "Because on some level she understood what it meant to be a vulnerable new life, dependent on others for survival." "It's just a theory, Doctor," Reed cautioned. "But in all my years of veterinary practice, I've learned that there are more connections between species than science has yet mapped. Your daughter may have tapped into one of those ancient connections, one that existed long before humans built walls between themselves and the natural world." As they spoke, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of the barn. The male bear, who had been standing guard at the entrance, moved to lie beside his mate and cubs. In the dim lantern light, his massive form seemed less threatening somehow, more like a sentinel protecting his family than a wild predator. Emma, who had been sitting quietly beside Lily, suddenly stood on her wobbly legs and toddled toward the bear family. Before Lily could stop her, she had reached the male bear and placed her tiny hand on his massive head. "Emma," Lily called softly, trying to keep panic from her voice. "Come back to Mommy, please." But Emma didn't move. Instead, she turned to look at her mother, her small face serene and somehow older than her months. "Same," she said again, patting the bear's head gently. "Same, Mama." The male bear rumbled softly, a sound not of threat but of acknowledgement. He lowered his massive head, allowing Emma's touch with a patience that defied all natural explanations. Dr. Reed watched in speechless wonder. "In all my years," she whispered, "I never thought I'd see anything like this." Outside the barn, the townspeople had begun to disperse, heading home with renewed perspectives and stories they would tell for generations. Inside, a different kind of story was unfolding, one of boundaries crossed and understanding gained, of a child who saw no difference between her own mother's struggle to bring her into the world and a bear's desperate fight to save her cubs. As the night deepened, Emma finally returned to Lily's arms, her eyes heavy with exhaustion after the extraordinary day. Together, mother and daughter sat in peaceful communion with the bear family, boundaries dissolved in the quiet darkness of the barn. The male bear kept silent watch, his massive presence a reminder of wild power tempered by unexpected gentleness. The mother bear nursed her cubs, her breathing steady and strong, her injured leg beginning the long process of healing. And between the two families, human and bear, a bridge had been built, one that would change not just their lives, but the very fabric of the community around them. A bridge constructed not of words or reason, but of something more primal and profound. The recognition that beneath our different exteriors, the core experiences of life, birth, struggle, and love remain the same across all living creatures. As Emma drifted to sleep in her mother's arms, Lily realized that her daughter had given the entire town a precious gift, the ability to see beyond fear and prejudice to the shared experiences that unite all living beings. The pregnant mother bear, who had been moments from death now, lay peacefully with her cubs, her future suddenly filled with hope instead of danger. And it had all happened because one small child, free from adult preconceptions, had recognized a simple truth, that a mother in need, whether human or bear, deserves compassion rather than fear, understanding rather than condemnation. 5 years passed. The old barn at the edge of the Morgan property stood empty now, but not forgotten. Inside, worn into the wooden posts, were claw marks at various heights, a testament to the family that had once found sanctuary there. Emma, now a bright-eyed kindergartner with wild curls and an uncanny connection to all living things, stood at the forest's edge with her parents. It was her 6th birthday, and she had asked for only one gift, to visit a special place deep in the mountains. "Are you sure they'll remember us?" Jacob asked gently as they hiked along a narrow trail. The path was part of Emma's Way, the wildlife corridor that had transformed their community's relationship with the forest and its inhabitants. Emma nodded with absolute certainty. "They remember," she said simply. Her vocabulary had expanded dramatically since that miraculous day, but she still spoke with the same direct clarity that had first manifested in her single word: same. After an hour's hike, they reached a sunlit clearing beside a rushing stream. Lily spread a blanket while Jacob unpacked a small picnic. Emma stood very still, her head tilted as if listening to a distant call. "They're coming," she whispered. Lily and Jacob exchanged glances. They had learned to trust their daughter's inexplicable senses, but even after all this time, moments like these sent shivers of wonder through them. Minutes passed. The forest sounds, birdsong, rustling leaves, the burbling stream, surrounded them in peaceful harmony. Then the sounds changed. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a deliberate heaviness to the silence that fell. From the shadow of the trees emerged a massive black bear, larger than they remembered, his coat glossy with health, his movements confident and powerful. Behind him came the mother bear, her once injured leg now bearing only a slight scar, her body strong and graceful. And behind her, 3 young bears, nearly grown but still bearing the unmistakable energy of youth. The cubs they had helped deliver were now healthy juveniles, almost ready to venture out on their own. Emma stood and walked forward, stopping at a respectful distance. The mother bear approached, her intelligent eyes fixed on the human child who had once risked everything to save her family. "Hello, friend," Emma said softly. The bear made a gentle chuffing sound, then lowered her massive head to Emma's level. The girl reached out slowly and touched the bear's nose, a moment of connection that bridged worlds. Lily felt tears streaming down her face as she watched. Jacob's arm tightened around her shoulders, his own eyes glistening. The young bears hung back, curious but cautious, while their father stood sentinel, watchful but unafraid. After a moment that seemed both fleeting and eternal, the mother bear stepped back. She looked at Emma one final time, then turned toward her grow. With deliberate movements, she guided them deeper into the forest, their true home, where they belonged. The male bear lingered briefly, his dark eyes holding a wisdom and acknowledgement that transcended species. He dipped his head once toward Emma, then followed his family into the shadows of the trees. As the bears disappeared from sight, Emma returned to her parents. Her small face was serene, filled with a quiet joy that needed no words. "They came to say goodbye, didn't they?" Lily asked gently, stroking her daughter's hair. Emma nodded. "The cubs are growing up. They need to find their own way now." She looked up at her mother with those wise eyes that had never lost their special insight. "But they wanted us to know they haven't forgotten." That evening, as they returned to their cabin, the small family paused at the crest of the hill overlooking the town. Below them, lights twinkled as dusk settled over the community. The town had changed in subtle but profound ways since that fateful day 5 years ago. The wildlife corridor sprawled like a green ribbon through the once divided land. Where fear had once ruled, understanding now flourished. "You know," Jacob said thoughtfully, "I used to think that day was about saving the bears, but it wasn't, not really." Lily looked at him questioningly. "It was about saving us," he continued, "about remembering what we'd forgotten, that we're part of something bigger, that the boundaries we create are mostly in our minds." Emma, perched on her father's shoulders, pointed to the distant mountains where shadows lengthened as the sun set. "Same," she said, using her first word with the same quiet certainty she had all those years ago. "We're all the same." As darkness embraced the forest and the stars emerged above, a lone call echoed across the valley, the deep, rumbling voice of a male bear, bidding farewell to the human child who had changed his family's destiny with the simple act of compassion. Emma smiled, her heart full of a connection that would never be broken. Some bonds, once formed, transcend time and distance, species and language. Some truths, once discovered, remain eternal. That in our most vulnerable moments we are all the same, all worthy of the same compassion, all part of the same miraculous web of life. And sometimes it takes a child to remind us of what we've always known deep in our hearts, that love, in its purest form, recognizes no boundaries.